First of all, I would like to welcome you all to this study day entitled Curriculum Development from Process to Product. I'd like to thank the administration in the name of Professor Abdullah, who provided us with the logistics to conduct this successful event. And I'd like to welcome the two vice deans, Professor on my right, Dean Boucherhi and Professor Slawi, as well as special thanks would go to Professor Malouk, who did not hesitate to, and who never hesitated to attend and participate in this successful event. I'd like to thank the guest speakers, Professor Ahmed Sharfi, who took also the trouble to come from the Faculty of Science of Education from Rabat. And then I'd like to welcome all the teachers in the master program as well as in the professional bachelor program. And I'd like to thank also the students in all the programs, first year, second year master program, as well as the licence professionnelle and the undergraduate program. The choice of I would say the theme of today, or the topic of today, is curriculum development and from process to product. Why this? And I think it's an issue in AET and applied linguistics. And I think I don't want to jump again before I give the floor to Professor Malouk, who will enlighten us more on this issue. I always reiterate that there is no teacher development without curriculum development. And I would also stress that there is no curriculum development without teacher development. For me, teacher development and curriculum development go hand in hand in the same line. So the questions that may be addressed today by Professor Malouk and the other guest speakers again are our students' needs taken into consideration in any curriculum design and curriculum development. Can students have a say in curriculum development? What are the factors involved in the making of the syllabus? Can we opt for a standardized, internalized, I would say, curriculum development or curriculum design? Said by Professor Malouk and Professor Sharfi, Idris, Weha, Bisha Mohammed, and Kifo at this during the session is a very important session, only the afternoon session. And we have to adapt our curriculum development to these changes and these developments. So, I don't want to delve into this right now, but I would like to thank you once again for attending this study day. And I hope it will be successful and you will gain a lot of benefit from it. And thank you so much. Now I give the floor to the Dean, the Vice Dean, Professor Boucherhi.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين. شكرا السيد رئيس الجلسة، السادة الأساتذة الباحثون، السادة طلبة الباحثون والجمهور الكريم، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. يطيب لي باسم السيد عميد كلية الآداب والعلوم الإنسانية بمكناس ونيابة عنه أن نفتتح هذا اليوم الدراسي في هذا الموضوع البالغ الأهمية بالنسبة لمنظومتنا التعليمية. لا يخفى عنكم أن التعليم في جميع البلدان المتقدمة هو قاطرة التنمية في هذه البلدان، ولا يخفى عنكم أن المنظومة التعليمية بصفة عامة هي الآلة التي بموجبها يتم إعداد هذه القاطرة التي تقود التنمية سواء في جانبها البشري أو في جوانبها العلمية المتعددة. والمنهاج الدراسي الذي هو موضوع هذا اليوم الدراسي في قلب هذه المنظومة، فإذا قام بالدور المنوط به وفق الهندسة التي تم بها وفق الأهداف التي صيغ من أجلها، فإن المنظومة التعليمية لا شك ستقوم بدورها وستؤدي الأدوار المنوطة بها. وإذا كان هناك خلل في هذا المنهاج لا شك أنه سينعكس بطريقة سلبية على كل العملية، خاصة على خرج العملية output operation. من ثم فإنني أهنئ القائمين على هذا اليوم الدراسي والمنظمين له أولا على اختيارهم هذا الموضوع لأهميته البالغة، وثانيا على اختيارهم للمتحدثين في هذا الموضوع من المتخصصين الأساتذة الذين نجلهم ونقدرهم ونرحب بهم ونعتبر أن حضورهم بيننا تشريف لهذه الكلية ولطلبتنا الباحثين وتشجيعا لنا جميعا للمضي في خدمة قضايا التعليم العامة والخاصة. أود أيضا أن أنوه بعمل مجموعة البحث في اللسانية التطبيقية وتعليم اللغات، وبهذا التكوين تكوين الماستر الذي المجموعة التي تنخرط في مختبر الدراسات اللسانية والتطبيقات الحاسوبية، والهدف من أجل تطوير العمليات المرتبطة بالبحث والتعليم بصفة عامة وربطها بالتقنيات الحديثة خاصة منها الحاسوبية والبيداغوجية. ففي هذا الإطار يأتي تنظيم هذا اليوم الدراسي، فنحن نقدر الجهد الذي تقوم به هذه المجموعة في إطار المختبر، ونقدر الجهد الذي يقوم به طلبة الماستر، وهذه أيضا فرصة لهم لإظهار قدراتهم ومؤهلاتهم التنظيمية والعلمية والبحثية. شكرا لجميع الحاضرين ونتمنى للجميع التوفيق، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.
Okay, I think before we start the session again, morning session, on behalf of the Professor Makili of this school, I would like to invite you for the post-cutting.
Yeah, sure.
session will be presented by Professor Mohammed Malouk from the Faculty of Science of Education. And we should know, I should give you some information about Professor Mohammed Malouk. I'm sure that not all of you know about the mastermind of EET in Morocco. Professor Malouk has been an active member in MATE for many years. I think he is one of the founders of MATE in Morocco. He is the national coordinator of EET in Morocco. Without him, we cannot have these programs we are running in all Moroccan institutions. Thanks to him, we are running this program of master program, professional bachelor program, and any program at the university level. So he is also, I think, has been the editor of MATE proceedings for many years. And his special interests are in the field of EET, methodology, research methodology, as far as I read about you and I know about you. And anyway, in short, as I said at the beginning, he is the mastermind of EET. And I give you the floor. Thank you so much for the time and the trouble you took and the time you invested to attend and participate in this study day. And thank you so much.
Thank you for the invitation. You said that, anyway, I wouldn't hesitate to respond to such a nice invitation. And it's also an opportunity for me to get out of Rabat and to get out of the pollution of Rabat, the hustle of traffic jams in Rabat, and the hustle of responding to students' requests. Okay, I just want to correct one thing anyway, before I say anything. I cannot claim to be, thank you for the nice words, but I cannot claim to be the national, what do you call me? National Pedagogical Coordinator of the National Curriculum. Well, I have a say in that, but I'm not the coordinator. I just wanted to correct this. Anyway, as the Vice Dean said, I think you should be commended for taking this initiative to organize a study day and to have your master students organize this study day. I think this is something that is worth commending, and it's one of the things that probably students will learn to do because this is, if you want to develop autonomy, not only as students but as researchers, so they should start now organizing these things. And I'm sure that they will learn lots of things from these activities, and we will see it with one of the concepts that sometimes people talk about, which is the hidden curriculum. And this is, in fact, probably it's more beneficial than the formal or the official curriculum. I just wanted to point out this to the students. Anyway, as I said, it's my pleasure and it's an honor to be addressing the audience, this audience. When you invited me, one of your students invited me, some of them are my students as well. Because I can see that Wadi, Yunus, Nordin, what is it? So these are my students as well, so we share them.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, I mean, we say we, talking on behalf of my colleagues, we prepared them for you so that you can carry on. Yeah, you can carry on. Okay, I said I hesitated, to choose a title. You selected the title Curriculum Development from Process to Product, and because of the, I'll come back to that controversy, process and product, And that's why I decided to talk about curriculum development from theory to practice. So you see, although it's in line with your first idea, I wanted to maybe, and at one point I chose a subtitle which would be an overview, because there are so many things to say about with the DES, the ex-DES, the DESA, and then I adapted some of it to the undergraduate program, so that, I mean, the students I mentioned are more or less initiated to some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about. So they know more or less. They should. I hope they remember some of the things that we did. And I'm sure they have lots of handouts. Probably they can show them to the others. So I advise them to share what they know, what they have, with the rest of their colleagues. So, without and we cannot conceive of the curriculum without thinking about the conception of education. And you know, the field of education is a fascinating area of inquiry. Was studied, it has been studied, still is studied by philosophers, teachers, historians, educationalists, psychologists, sociologists, economists, you know, and the rest. So keeping this in mind, today, as a result of globalization, you know, education and hence curriculum is increasingly facing, I deliberately chose the adjective, daunting challenges. And I know people who work in this area, the ones who want to design programs, the ones who design textbooks, they know these daunting challenges that they are facing. The other thing that I would like to also share with you and to keep in the back of our minds is that when we talk about education, there is educational theory. But you see, the word education in the Anglo-Saxon conception is slightly different from the way it is conceived of in the Mediterranean or Latin, let's say, tradition. And you know, the word sciences of education, for example, it's meaningless in the Anglo-Saxon world. We talk more about education, educational research, education technology, and whatever you like, but not sciences. Simply because education draws a lot on other disciplines, and be it psychology, philosophy, economics, management, you know, education. So it has been trying to establish as a science, but people don't talk about it as a science. They talk about it as, you know, field of research. Okay, it's scientific to some extent, because there are certain things that are involved in education which are not 100% scientific. So when we talk about curriculum in singular, it's just like talking about education. So, because the curriculum is at the heart of the educational enterprise. Education is the center of it. So, from this curriculum theory, because there's a lot about curriculum theory, one thing I just want to say at this stage is that, you know, theory of curriculum is a set of concepts which are translated into models. So this is my probably first definition. Very slight, very simple. But the other thing that I would like you to keep in mind is that concepts are universal, but not models. It means we might share concepts that are the ones used universally, but models of translating these concepts are not universal. Okay, roughly, these are the elements or the components of the menu that I'm suggesting for you this morning. Very briefly, origin, I will say a few words about the origin and development of curriculum, conceptions of curriculum. Some definitions, I think, and I will ask my colleagues and my friends to bear with me this, because I was thinking more of students than of teachers, or we have inspectors here, the ones who have been working on this. So there is sometimes something that we forget in the field of education as well as in the field of curriculum development, is the importance of aims, goals and objectives. I will stop for a few seconds on these terms. Then I will share with you some of the things that I used in my teaching, some models, curriculum models. I think it's worth knowing. And then, there is another word which is parallel to curriculum, which is syllabus. And the same thing that we say about curriculum can also be said about syllabus. So when we talk about syllabus design, just like talking about curriculum design, talk about curriculum development, syllabus development, and so on and so forth. And then I'll end up with some practical things. Okay. Now, since I hope as we go, I will unfold these things about curriculum. Now, basically, two areas are covered by this notion or concept of curriculum. The first thing, and here is for you a second definition of curriculum. It's a plan for the education of learners. Very general, very simple. But there is the other side of curriculum. It's a field of study. Okay, let me say a few words about this. So, as a plan for the education of learners, it has been a concern, for many centuries. So it's not. Because it's, as I said earlier on, it's at the heart of educational concerns. Whether it's private, public, religious, or whatever. The notion, the concept, either implicitly or explicitly, is there. The word curriculum comes from Greek. The word curriculum, and it means the field where horses race. Or if you want, you say it's a course race. That's why, this notion of course. Now, one thing I think which is very important is that the prevailing view of education largely determines the type and the choices in education. Now, the second thing, as a field of study, now it's a specialization, by the way. It became a field of study, particularly in the United States in the 20th century, let's say, starting in the 30s, 40s, and then later on it became a field of study. So that most, if not all, American universities, American colleges, you will find a department of curriculum department. And then you can get a master's degree in curriculum. You can get a PhD in curriculum. It's an area of specialization. And on the other hand, if you go to the Middle East, in Arab countries, which are directly linked to the Anglo-Saxon tradition, all كليات التربية, they have قسم المناهج, قسم which is شعبة, the equivalent of department, because in the Middle East you use the word قسم instead of شعبة, قسم المناهج وطرائق التدريس, and we call curriculum and instruction. I'll come back to these two notions. Okay. So, as I said, it's a specialization, and today, if you go into the website, you will discover that there are, numerous journals, curriculum journals, which are highly specialized. Okay, as we move on into this so that we understand what is meant by curriculum, now there is another word which is synonymous with curriculum, which is program. So we say curriculum or program of study. At this stage we could say that it's the list of subjects such as English, math, or it could be specific titles. And that could be, for example, like US history or elementary algebra. And that means the content. And we talk about the history curriculum, or maybe just one part of it as curriculum. In other words, I mean, we could talk about it, it's a course content of a particular course. Now, when we also talk about curriculum, obviously we are referring to planned learning experiences. So we have content, and then we have learning experiences. What is meant by learning experiences? Opportunities, that means learning opportunities, the activities, the skills, all of these are part of this notion of curriculum. Or it could also be seen as experiences, quote, and had under the auspices of the school. And here we have the invisible, the hidden, both unplanned and unplanned. And then obviously we have evaluation, which is part of the curriculum. Remember I said that there is word that goes parallel with curriculum, which is syllabus. Broadly speaking, we might say that curriculum is within the American tradition since the great philosopher Dewey, and the British tradition is more syllabus-oriented in terms of these concepts. Here is for you a definition, and then you will see what it involves. So, a curriculum includes the goals, the content, processes, resources, let me see, content, goals, content, processes, resources, means of evaluation of the learning experiences in and out of the school and the community through classroom instruction and related programs. I did this in Nahari, so that's why I didn't put the exact, I know the author, that I apologize for not giving you the date and the, because I didn't have time to check. Second definition, curriculum is a broad concept which refers to all the activities which children engage in under the auspices of the school. It includes not only what is learned, but also how it is learned, and how teachers help students. The support material, the material itself, that means the content, the methods of assessment, and the facilities to be used from modules. And then I end up at this stage with this definition of operationalized in terms of language curriculum. A broad description of general goals by indicating a general educational cultural philosophy which applies across subjects together with the theoretical orientation to language and language learning. In fact, most of those quotes are taken from this book by Dubin and Goldstein, which is Course Design, one of the textbooks that I use with my students. It's still, although it's old, but it's very... Now, if you, for the time being, there are 2 or 3 words that come up, that have been coming up repeatedly. One of them is goals, objectives. And then the other one is content and learning. In other words, we are in the field of education. Now, you see, as I was saying at the beginning, curriculum, there are the formal aspects and there are the informal, or what we call the hidden aspects. You have a definition, relatively recent one, by Hargreaves, 2001, from the British Educational Research Journal. And by the way, he is one of the men in charge of curriculum, what they call, they have in England a body, they call it Curriculum and Qualifications Authority. He's one of the bosses of this. They decide on the curriculum in England. It's called Curriculum and Qualifications Authority. Qualifications, it means certification, whether it's GCSE, the A levels, the O. I'm sorry, I'm using terminology probably you're not familiar with. It's the equivalent of the baccalaureate, brevet, baccalaureate. It's called GC, General Certificate of Education. And these are under the label of qualifications. Now, the formal one, I think, for the time being, we're familiar with it, is primary the knowledge skills and understanding that teachers intend students to acquire. Much of this consists of disciplinary bodies. Disciplinary, that means subjects, disciplines of knowledge, but also of ways of thinking and behavior. This is, I think, important. Although the formal curriculum deals predominantly in the intellectual excellences, the moral excellences play an important part. Now, from the same author, this is the formal one. Now, this is what he says about the hidden curriculum. Consists of what students learn from their participation in school, but which is not planned. And you know that probably in some cases students learn more than what is planned. And it has, this curriculum has an elaborate content, the art of pleasing. Sometimes, this is the behavior of students. How do they behave? The art of pleasing teachers. Skill of coping, because this is something that they learn. Skill of coping, how they develop their own strategies to cope with the constraints of institutional life. The ability to control the relationships with peers. And I think this is, sometimes we overlook it, and so on. Some of which is not necessarily educationally desirable, by the way. So, hidden curriculum, we have no control of it, but we need to monitor it. We need to know it, to be aware of it, and then monitor it. The hidden curriculum exercises a profound influence on students and continues to be overlooked by most teachers, which is unfortunate, since the hidden curriculum can be a vehicle for achieving desirable ends. So, probably one of the lessons that we can draw from this is that when we design a curriculum, we need to monitor so as to be able to see the, if you want, the artifact translated in terms of hidden curriculum and what it produces in the students. You can imagine the changes that are produced in students when we implement a curriculum, not only intellectually, cognitively, or in terms of skills, but also in terms of behavior with teachers, with their peers. Okay. Now, as I said right from the beginning, we can't conceive of education or curriculum without conceiving of a philosophy of education. A philosophy of education which largely determines the choices. When we, talk about the underlying philosophy, for example, behind an educational orientation or educational choices, why to include this and not that? Why to do this and not that? Then we have to think of how the designers, the politicians, I'll come back to this, the decision makers, how do they see the education of the future citizen? Because there is always an underlying philosophy. You might say there are a number of things that we include for their own sake. But there is always, as we say, there are always asbab nuzul. That means we don't do them just for their own sake, because we want to attain certain objectives. In the field of education, I'm sorry you can't read this because it's so small. I just put them there for me, but I will share with you basically the ideas. When we look at the history of education, it can be summed up into 4 basic philosophies, regardless of the country, regardless of, the historical period we are interested in. The first type of philosophy is what is referred to in philosophical terms as perennialism. Perennity, that means something that remains, it does not change. Perennialism. Now, this view of education looks at, if you want, the programs, at the curriculum as something that will maintain the system, maintain the society. How? In terms of knowledge, in terms of, you know, what is included in education. It refers, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with this, because until recently this is what we have had in our educational system. It means that we consider that there is great knowledge, and there are great books, and those should be the backbone of the curriculum. And then at the university level, my colleagues, and they know this, you hear some professors saying, we need to go back to Ummahat al-Kutub. That means the basic knowledge. Why? Because philosophically, we look at knowledge as something that is permanent. It does not change. So this is the philosophy of education. The second thing is what is called essentialism. And it's a philosophy. It means we need to include in education what is essential. We should not. This is a movement, if you want, from perennialism to essentialism, in the sense that we want to limit the knowledge to what is essential. What is added here is the skills. So in addition to knowledge, we need to add skills. Now the third philosophy is called progressivism. And this started in the mid-20th century. What is meant by progressivism? I mean, education should be a means to advance. That means we need to be pragmatic about it. We need to advance. We need to build society and make society advance. And hence, we will select only knowledge and skills that will help advance. That means we construct progressively. And it started with philosophers like, you know, Freire, Paulo Freire. Probably some of you are familiar with his name. He's very well known. And then we have, you know, the great American philosopher, educationist, John Dewey. And the last philosophy, it's called Reconstructionism. Reconstruction. Now here, it's some sort of view of education and then hence of the curriculum, which says that education is a means to change society. Not to develop or evolve, but to change. We want to change society. Very broadly, these are the four, and these you will find them in many orientations, in many curricula. I'm using it in plural. And many people actually adopt this view. Okay, and why I'm talking about this? Because it's very important to keep in mind why do we have education, and then why do we have curriculum? And then we have three levels of decision. There are three levels. The first level is the policy makers. You know, it could be politicians, it could be citizens, it could be groups of influential groups, lobbies. You know, these they influence, they are. And they come up with policy statements, with priorities, with values. And these, what do they tell us? The aim, الغايات الكبرى, as we call them. الغايات الكبرى. When you look at the National Charter for Education and Training, الميثاق الوطني للتربية والتعليم, what does it spell? It doesn't give you the details of why this and this, but it gives us the policy, the statements of the policy of education. It gives us the priorities. It gives us the values that should underlie the educational system and hence the curriculum. Now, these aims are translated into goals by the administrators, the ones who are in charge. For example, the Ministry of Education. The Ministry of Education. And then they will call, people who are in charge of subjects, of areas, to translate the aims into goals. Goals, so that you have Sibahsin or, you know, or the inspectors, and they sit down and they say, okay, how are we going to translate this into goals? Okay, and then afterwards, these are put into curricula, into syllabi, or into profiles of students. And then the third level is objectives. It means how those goals are translated into operational objectives, the ones that are applicable into the classroom. Okay, having said this, let's go quickly through some models. You know, my students are familiar with these. So we have, I mean, when we conceive of models, the first one is by Lady Hilda Taba. Yes. Yes, I remember the students laughing at this name. One of the first, you know, curriculum theorists are suggesting models. Models. So you see the components of the model are very simple. That means the first thing is diagnosis of needs. Now, I want just for a minute to stop on this because it's quite interesting. What do we mean by needs? And diagnosis. You know, sometimes we use the word needs assessment, needs. Come on. Needs analysis, thank you. By the way, I forgot to tell you, please do not hesitate to interrupt me if I say something that is nonsensical, or if you don't understand what I'm saying. So don't hesitate. I prefer this to be interactive rather than, you know, just like that. So what we mean by needs, you know, this is.
Don't worry, we will bombard you with questions once we finish.
Okay. What, have you trained them? Okay. Now, what do we mean by needs? Because this is an issue. It's really intricate. In needs, when we talk about needs, we can conceive of them in many ways. We can conceive of them as what students want, what they desire, what they would like. And here we have to be very careful because sometimes, you know, these are, you know, fuzzy, changing, and sometimes they are very elusive and sometimes slippery. Because today I want something and the next day I might want something else. Okay, I prefer this color today, and then the following week I'm no longer interested in this. I don't want it. So is this really a need? Huh? So we have to be very careful with this. And that's why when we try to find out, we need to find out in terms of gaps. Gaps, that means what they know, what they don't know. This is an interesting concept, gaps. Deficiencies means what they lack. Variations in students' backgrounds, because this is an important aspect. So, okay, for the time being, I'm not going to say how we can do needs analysis. If you want, I can expand on this, how to carry out a needs analysis. So the second thing, once we know the needs, and remember the needs, it's not only of the students. It's the needs of society, we will come back to this, the needs of the institution. Okay. From this we can formulate, you know, goals and objectives. Once we know this, then we can start selecting the content of our curriculum. When we select it, the next step is to organize it. After which, you know, we have a content. Now we need to translate this content into learning experiences. And then afterwards, we need to organize those learning experiences. And in terms of activities. And then we have, at one point or another, to consider how we are going to assess students. That means both the content and form of evaluation. And then, at the end, we need to check the balance and sequence. Is there a balance? Is there a good sequence? Once we do this, we need to test, pilot this experimentally, because we cannot generalize right from the beginning. We design it, we might be, you know, however professional we can be, whatever the expertise that we can have in designing a syllabus or a curriculum, if we do not experiment certain units for validity, then obviously we have had it, as we say in modern Arabic. Okay, so we need to test experimental units for validity and especially teachability. Teachability means, is it amenable to organizing as a teaching activity? Because there are certain things that we cannot teach. Or in terms of their classroom practices, they might be very difficult to implement. After this, when we do the experimentation, obviously we have to analyze the results of the experimentation so as to revise and to consolidate what we have designed. And then, afterwards, we develop a framework in terms of scope, in terms of developing a rationale for this. And lastly, then we can afford to disseminate or to implement. Otherwise, we haven't done this. So this is one model. Another one, which is slightly linear. On top, which you don't see, I think it's, if I can, this is again, the first one, if you remember, it was linear, one after the other one. Now the second one also is more or less linear. But what do we have? We have at the top, we have the sources, basic sources 3, okay? Students, society, and then, no. They have no say. It's the subject itself. Because, you know, the way we design a curriculum for English will be different from the way we design a curriculum for physics. Yeah, because the subject matter. Now, once we know this, the needs of these, the needs of the requirements, the constraints of the subject matter, the needs of society, the needs of students, then we have tentative general objectives from which we are going to screen these through a philosophy of education. That means, what is the philosophy that we are going to adopt? Okay? Do we view, remember, very briefly, are we going to use this curriculum within a view of education that highlights knowledge and skills? Or are we going to screen them through a philosophy of education that highlights, for example, autonomy, constructivism, changing, you see, without focusing too much on knowledge. Okay, and then after this screening, we have precisely the instructional objectives and teaching objectives, and then we select, obviously, the learning experiences, selection, organization, and then direction of learning, and then evaluation. So roughly, more or less the same steps. Don't worry, I'll come back to these. The third one I wanted to show you is slightly different. It's not linear. That means in terms of time. Remember, the two previous ones are conceived in terms of sequence from defining objectives to developing, designing, selecting, evaluation. Okay. Now this one is slightly different in the sense it is cyclic. You know, it's just like an algorithm. Those of you who are familiar with information technology, I mean, the programs, they are cyclic. There are stages where we go back to the beginning. That means when we design, we experiment, or we implement, and then there is room for going back to the beginning to make changes. So it is dynamic. It's a dynamic, I mean, just through this diagram, I wanted you to get the idea of you know, it is a conception of curriculum that is rather dynamic. It's not static. It's dynamic. Okay. After this talk about curriculum, let's move to the second concept, which is syllabus. Again, from the same authors. As I told you, you know, this British tradition of syllabus, syllabi, or syllabuses, both are used, either syllabi or syllabuses. In fact, it was D.A. Wilkins back in the mid-70s who started using, you know, it was the first one in his book, notional functional syllabuses rather than syllabi. You know, just like all the words that are from a Latin origin, you know, just like curriculum, curricula, you can't say syllabus, syllabuses, or syllabi. So, what is a syllabus? It's a statement of content for an instructional program for a specific part of the curriculum. So you see the relationship between syllabus and curriculum. So a syllabus within a curriculum is a specific statement of a specific part of the curriculum or a specific, for example, a school subject at a particular level for a given level, without the additional components, which is evaluation. I think I have it somewhere. If you look at the, and you have gentleman here in front of me know it. What is it? This is the national curriculum for English. They know it. It's the latest one. And you have here the description of the for each level. سنة ثانية إعدادي ثالثة common core جدًا مشترك and then first. So if you don't have a copy, you need to grab them and then they'll give you a copy. Well, if you want to make a copy, I give you. Sure. Thanks. So you have syllabus, as I said, for a given subject for a particular level. Another definition, it's a more detailed and operational statement of teaching and learning elements which translates the philosophy of the curriculum into a series of planned steps with more focused objectives at each level. So it's highly operational, as we see. Oops. A single curriculum can be the basis for developing a variety of specific syllabuses which are concerned with locally defined audiences. I deliberately chose this because when we design a syllabus, obviously in terms of needs, in the design, in the development, we have to take into account the specificities of the audience. The audience, it addresses, because a syllabus addresses particular needs and intermediate objectives. And syllabi prescribe the content to be covered by a given course from only a small part of the total program or the total curriculum. Now, two notions probably, very operational. When we talk about syllabus, we are not talking about textbooks. We are talking about the program. That means the content. And that's why I like the distinction suggested by Alexander. He calls this a proto-syllabus. If you want, it's just like the skeleton, with the objectives, the descriptions, and it's the specification of the content derived from the purposes, the description of purposes the learners have for acquiring the target language. And we have a pedagogical syllabus. So we have a proto-syllabus and a pedagogical syllabus, because I think this distinction is worth keeping in mind. And pedagogical syllabus is a plan to implement the syllabus into the classroom. I hope I'm not taking too much time. Now, if we want to develop, let me share with you some questions. You are now a syllabus designer, a curriculum. I have brought you to a stage where you can start thinking about developing a syllabus or a curriculum. So, obviously, you could start with some questions. Now, the first thing, remember, that we need to do is needs analysis, assessment, diagnosis. And I mean, anybody wanting to go into this, I just suggest that, although it's very old, but it's still very useful. John Mundy's needs analysis, it's a whole book on needs analysis and the techniques for identifying the needs. And his questionnaires he used have been adapted, modified, but they still contain the core of what was suggested originally by John Mundy. Now questions. Questions. What are the students' needs? How can I assess them? How can I assess my students' the students' needs or the students for whom I am designing this syllabus or curriculum so that I can address them? And once we do this needs assessment, we need to determine goals and objectives. And the questions are, what are the purposes and intended outcomes of the course? You might ask, what is the relationship between intended outcomes and the purposes? You know, sometimes we have very nice purposes, declared objectives, goals, but it's very rare that we translate them in terms of what is really an outcome, intended outcome. I want to teach for this, I want to develop communication or communicative competencies in students. Now, for me to be able, you know, to say a few words about this, I have to say, it's not enough. It's not enough to say, develop students' communicative competence. I should say, by the end of the year, the students should be able to demonstrate a certain capacity to understand short texts in English. Or, by the end of the year, the students should be able to produce a good, accurate, appropriate paragraph. By the end of the year, the students should be able to hold a short conversation with a native speaker of English. You know, these are the intended outcomes. So, you see that there is a slight difference between stating the objectives of the course, means why we do it, we want to develop this, but it's more useful to try to translate them in terms of intended outcomes. Okay. And I know, you know, talking to some inspectors, the problem that they have with when they go with teachers is that they have problems, you know, transmitting this message. How do you want your students to behave at the end of the lesson? What are the intended outcomes at the end of the unit, for example? Now, next. So, what will the students need to do or learn to achieve these goals? And this is a question that has, you know, pedagogical rationale. Once I know the intended outcomes, then I need to think about how the students, what will the students need to do? In other words, will they need to read? Will they need to speak in the classroom? Will they need to do research in the classroom? So what will they need to do to achieve those intended outcomes? Once I have answered these questions, so I can go back to my syllabus and then I can conceptualize the content through the following questions. What will be the backbone of what to teach? That means the skeleton, the content. And then then here's the major things, the most important, because we can't ultimately, we can't think of everything at the same time. So, but we need to determine the backbone, the skeleton. What will be included in the syllabus? And then we move on with maybe the fourth or fifth stage is we select and we develop materials and activities. Now we have the content, we have the objectives. Now we want to translate this into teaching and learning activities. How and gentle on the ear, but sometimes it's, you know, it goes beyond 80 or 90 decibels, so it's not gentle on the ears. So how and with what will the course will be taught? Means what materials? Because here when we talk about materials, is it textbooks? Is it, you know, audio material? Is it taped material? Is it visuals? So how the course will be taught? What is the role of the teacher? Because when we talk about pedagogy, we talk about the role of the teacher, the role of the students. How do we conceive of it? Is the teacher simply somebody imparting language, imparting knowledge? Or is the teacher someone who is helping learners to learn? That means designing activities, managing activities, okay? Some sort of, you know, dynamo in the classroom to stimulate learning. Once we answer these questions, then we will see how we can organize the content, the activities, and the systems. That means in what type of system that we are going to organize it. We are not going to leave everything without organization. You know, organization is very important because it helps you monitor, it helps you progress, it helps. If we don't organize, then even the students themselves will not see the discipline, quote unquote, of the whole organization or the rationale of the whole organization. And one before last is the evaluation. How are the students going to be assessed? What they have learned? What type of tests? Informal, formal tests, quizzes, okay? And what is the frequency of this assessment? Formative, remember, formative versus summative evaluation. Thank you. And something that we sometimes don't take into account, it's not enough, you know, to judge the efficiency of the syllabus through the results of the students. We need to evaluate the syllabus itself, the program. I know that, you know, people don't accept this. I'm talking about university because when we want to implement. You know, remember last year or 2 years ago when they sent in for, you know, self-evaluation of filière, of program. Many teachers resisted this, and then I have, you know, something like 10 or 12 years ago, we were running a DESA program, and then at the end of my course, I wanted to have feedback from the students. So I wanted to evaluate the effectiveness of my course. And then I gave an anonymous questionnaire to students. These are graduate students. They say, please do it. And then when I wanted to share the experience with the other teachers, they said to me, hey, are you crazy? How can you trust students to evaluate? They say they just wanted to have feedback. Whether what they understood, what they didn't understand. Is that too much? In fact, I discovered that it was too much. I gave them too many things to read, too many articles, and then it was good for me. But teachers, for example, would not accept to be evaluated by their students. It's not easy. Okay, and teachers don't like to be evaluated by inspectors as well. Now, when you design the syllabus, one thing, you know, because we work in a context. We work with constraints. So we have to consider the resources, what is available. We have to consider the constraints. If you can design a nice syllabus, which will involve, for example, the use of ICT. We should eliminate the C, by the way. It's IT. It's no. Okay. If you design a syllabus which involves this, and then you find yourselves in the situation where computers are not available, or even, you know, access to the internet is not available, so what's the use of designing such syllabus? So constraints, resources, these are very important. Okay, it should be done systematically. It's not something that is. It's not by simply asking informally people what would like. Now we need to do it systematically. We define goals and objectives, and then we map out a profile of what the students, who these students are and what they want. And then we design a program, and then we evaluate to assess knowledge and to assess competence. Okay. In your, I see there curriculum development from process to product. These words, sometimes they, at one point I wanted to call it the product process continuum, or the product process divide. So either there is a continuum or there is a divide between these notions of product and process. The product-oriented view is an offspring of idealism, realism, and perennialism in education, adopting prescriptivism in knowledge, skills, values, and it is analytical. In other words, when we talk about product-oriented, that means it is something that is finite. It is static. The curriculum is static. From what I understood in your thinking means how should we go about it until we reach a product. But I took advantage of that just to talk about these. Okay, so the process, so you see the product oriented to education is this. Though the process one is different. It's a constructivist view. Now what is the basic idea? The basic idea is that we can have general, I'll come back to this for a minute, in a minute. The general thing, we can have an idea about the contents and the profiles of the students, but I want to find mechanisms and ways of leaving some room for change in the middle. That means the focus is on the process, so that the curriculum, the program, will unfold, will develop gradually as I implement certain parts. And then the process itself will bring out new things as it is implemented. And the program and the curriculum will incorporate these new things as a result of the implementation process. So this is the view. Now in the LT, because in fact it is here that you will find this process, product, and if you want to have a good discussion of this, just go back to one of the books by Noonan, David Noonan, and but the ones who started the yes, that is the good exemplification of process syllabus or curriculum. But the people who started the whole thing in the LG was Candlin and Whittleson. Candlin and Whittleson, as well as Breen, Mike Breen, and this was translated by Janice Yolden into what she calls a communicative syllabus. And it is a sociolinguistic perspective to language learning. That means it's just like it's an interesting idea if you have time, if you want to analyze this. It's a nice design from a sociolinguistic perspective. In other words, she adopts the if you want the history between brackets of a normal child that learns his mother tongue sociolinguistically without being monitored. Obviously there is some monitor from parents, from the community, from the society, but the idea is to focus on the different stages that unfold, develop gradually as a sociolinguistic process. And it's quite interesting if you want to know, to go deep into this notion of process from a communicative perspective. And in fact, the basic idea comes from this notion of sociopragmatics. In the area of sociopragmatics, starting with Habermas and afterwards, communication is unpredictable. That means it unfolds. When you are, we have some room for prediction. But generally, communication develops. It is unpredictable, and hence, learning language as communication, that's the terminology from Widdowson, learning language as communication, not for communication, but language as communication. I insist on this because the distinction is very important, is a matter of process of unfolding that takes place in communicative process. When you interact with someone, the communication develops. Sometimes we have control over it, sometimes we don't have. And this is the whole idea that was put into syllabus design, especially communicative syllabus design. It was attempted by Yoden, by Brumfitt, by Christopher Brumfitt, Johnson, and especially Noonan, latest. That's the last one. I gave you the history, the chronology. They argue for a process-oriented perspective. And, broadly we can categorize this using these words. It's social, it is interactive. So these dimensions are, in fact, incorporated in the design of the syllabus. The social perspective, interaction, problem solving. Experience oriented, and it is critical. And that's why we talk about critical syllabus process. It was David Noonan who came up with this notion, which is quite interesting. Problem solving, not in mathematics. An act of communication by definition is a problem solving. I think, this is so obvious that we sometimes forget that in the act of communication it is a problem exercise. You ask a question, or you hear an information, or you see someone just, even without talking, just gesture or face, and then you interpret. This interpret, those of you who are familiar with this, we say we have speaker's intention versus hearer's interpretation, and it's the problem, it's there. Speaker's intention versus hearer's interpretation. Very well known phrase, I borrow usually from Leach when we talk about within the field of pragmatics. So, focus not only on what, but also on how, and especially why. So when we talk about process, it's the how and the why. It's synthetic, and today we talk about procedures or procedural syllabus. And then obviously its reference here is made to tasks and discovering and building knowledge. In other words, instead of focusing on knowledge itself, but on the process of making knowledge, the process of building knowledge, skills, competencies, and values. And in this case, what do we have? We have curriculum guidelines. And these are obviously translated into pedagogical syllabus. We don't have the details, just general guidelines. The one we have, there are too many details. This is the criticism that I make to it. There are too many details. And these are, the more details you give, the more constraints that you put on, the ones who are going to implement it. Leave some room. If you allow me, internationally, when we look at the comparison between countries and so on, in international tests and like PISA, like TIMSS, like PIRB, these international tests that are used to classify countries and classify educational systems. Morocco is one of the, this, unfortunately. No, what, I was surprised by the fact that a country like Finland always comes at the top, always the first. You know, before the Americans, before the Japanese, before the Koreans, Finland. And then, I said, hey, why? What is special about this? So I had to read and then find information and then did some research just to understand why. And I think the secret lies in two things. Two things. The first one is, you know, teacher autonomy. They have a national curriculum with general guidelines. Teacher autonomy, the teachers have all the freedom to use the textbooks that they want, as long as they stay within the guidelines, to design the activities. So that's the first, teacher autonomy. I sum it up without going into the detail. And the second thing is teacher qualifications. Teacher qualifications and teacher salaries. Teacher salary. Now, to be, you know, a middle school teacher, the equivalent of you have to have a master's degree, and it's highly selective, plus a 1-year training, a master's degree and 1-year training, and it's very highly selective. It's not anybody. It's not because you have a master that you are going to be accepted. And more than this, when I mentioned salaries, because sometimes there are good incentive, by the way, to be a good professional. You know, there are, in some cases, you know, they get more than what doctors get. You know, and socially, it's highly valued. You know, teaching profession, socially highly valued, highly selective, very competitive. Now I close the quote. The information. It's just talk about a curriculum. You know, sometimes too much detail. Sometimes because if there is no room for autonomy, so that the teacher can adapt to his or her situation, then obviously we are going to just like formatting or treating everybody equally. And we know that, you know, that is the bad thing about democracy, especially in learning, because we don't learn the same rhythm, we don't have the same. Okay, how do we design? Okay, how do we design? Oh, sorry. Now today, I wanted to share with you this. If we want to really to be modern, if you want to design a good project, you know, a syllabus or a curriculum is not, and it's not the task of a person or one person only. We need to have a team. We need to work as a team, and I think this is very crucial. It's a team project, and hence we need to have a team. And this is not even enough. We need to have some consultants. It means the ones who can advise us. We might be specialists in one thing, but we might need information and feedback from other specialists. If I want to, you know, ultimately design a program or a curriculum that will lead to a given job, then I will do a job analysis. If I don't do this, then I might be missing something. And it's only then that I can start designing my program according to what I said earlier on. We will see it in a minute. We need to pilot it, we need to implement it, and then we need to evaluate it. And Larousse knows this. You know, when I look at the programs, master's programs, not only here in Morocco, I mean, I consider myself lucky having the opportunity to look at all what's going on in the country. But when I look at the stated aims and objectives, and then I look at the content of the syllabus or the components of the syllabus, I always find them sort of discrepancy. In other words, just sometimes we state something, we declare that we want to achieve this, But what we actually do will not. I know, they know, and anybody, you know, could find out, could discover that what they actually, either because it's not reasonable, it's not feasible, you see, and that's problematic. Okay, maybe again, just to, as a means of not summarizing, there is maybe one before last slide. So, a curriculum and a syllabus, it has to have foundations. Must be very well founded. You know, just like a house. If you don't have good foundations, there are risks of collapse. And these should be very firm and very well articulated. And then, on the basis of the foundations, then we can design. Now, design here, think of the architect. It means design, mapping out, and then we construct. So there's a difference between the architect and the one who constructs. And then we have to be very careful in the construction process that we stick to what was designed. And what is meant by development? Excuse me. Development is that it's what, just to give you an image of, you know, the ones who have had the chance of having a house built or something, you know, you have the body, the skeleton, but the most important thing is what they call definition. Which sometimes I used to call definition. Now, development is there, and this stage is very important. You know, paying attention to the details. That means how things are sequenced, and then do they match, and everything. So development, that's the most crucial stage, and then implementation. And then again, engineering, and we go back to engineering. You know, there is this phase of, you know, design, construction, and then implementation and engineering. So I put them together because they go together, implementation and engineering. Engineering, that means monitoring, and then seeing where change is necessary, what are the things that need to be amended, or the things that perhaps need to be dropped totally. Completely forgotten. And on the basis of this phase of implementation engineering, we can bring in changes. And then we need to evaluate it. I think that, yes, two more. Bear with me, I'm sorry I have taken too much time. Now, there is a concept also that when you look at the literature and articles, curriculum and the instruction. Look at the rows. Yeah. Now, what is the relationship? It's in the bottom. You know, we can go from the general, ultimate general, in terms of goals, in terms of aims of the curriculum, and then we go to the immediate specific, that's the instruction. So there is some sort of continuum, you see, curriculum and instruction. So we might have a curriculum without specification of instruction, in which case it's nonsensical. And that's why they go together most of the time. We talk about curriculum and instruction. It means we need the plan, the outline, the guidelines, the content, the list of activities. Then we have to specify, to translate them into teaching, immediate, specific. Some related issues, you know, and this is why we can talk about curriculum and textbooks. We have a curriculum that can be translated into textbooks, and textbooks you have, not to dwell on this, you have content of textbook, you have the guidelines that accompany textbooks, how to use them. You have a teacher's book, most of the time. Student's book, teacher's book. You have curriculum and teaching materials. This is a concept, and if somebody is interested in this, I advise you to, if you forgot to write the reference. Brian Tomlinson has written a huge book called Materials Development. The techniques, the procedures that could be used to develop, to design materials. You know, Tomlinson, Brian, only one with by himself. Yes, you have met. I think you were in one of the 4 or 5 years ago. We invited him with the inspector seminar in Rabat, a national seminar for inspectors. We invited this man. He's a huge man. Yeah, I remember, Brian. I had a chance to work with him in Cambridge on certain tests. Now, curriculum and evaluation. Now, we need to be clear about formative versus summative evaluation, and then curriculum evaluation. So these two things are needed. Now, curriculum change and innovation. Now, this is something that is, a lot of, recent discourse, current discourse about curriculum and innovation. Now, we must be clear about whether we are talking about institutional innovation or individual innovation. That means the one that is brought in by teachers, by the ones who use those curriculum and here, of course, it's basically at the level of teacher and learner autonomy. And these are issues that will be more and more crucial for the design of future curriculum. It means the role of teachers, the role of students. And you know that, especially with access to the internet, now we no longer have control of what the learners learn, to be honest, to be serious about it. And then the last thing is curriculum and staff development. The moment we design a curriculum, we need to do training. And unfortunately, sometimes we bring in new things and then we say, go and apply them, without any training, either pre-service or in-service training. And I think this is one of the biggest mistakes that we have been doing here in this country, is that we bring in new things and then we ask. Now here, I remember writing an article on this, and they said teachers are not technicians. Means here is a recipe, do it. And they are not. They are not technicians. They are educators. That means they should have some sort of autonomy. I wanted to finish off with that one.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Luke, for your interesting and illuminating presentation. In fact, you took us on a journey to discover curriculum development, and you clarified the concept of curriculum development. So you trace it back to its history. And you have revealed a lot of things about this about the national curriculum. A lot of things that are hidden, and now they are, being discovered. I think that we have learned a lot about the what, the how, and the why of the national curriculum documented or written curriculum. We also understand how decision makers view the future of the education system in Morocco, and how aims are translated into goals, and these goals are themselves turned into objectives. And I learned one thing very important today. It's about the film that you said that two principles, two key factors that make them at the top of education all over the world is this teachers' autonomy and teachers' qualification. And this you say that the teachers need some air. I would add the word air, not fresh air, sorry, but this A stands for autonomy, I stand for independence, and R stands for responsibility. And I think if these elements are taken into consideration, the teachers may be more effective than they are. It's the same for students. And because I think we'll expect more questions, many questions from the audience, I'll give, I think, the floor now to the second speaker, Professor Teacher Aki Fouad. He's a master program, 7-year master program, and he's writing his master dissertation on curriculum development. And I think he was at the time puzzled and confused about the choice, and I told him, why don't you uncover and make a journey again on curriculum development? You have the floor. Go ahead.
Okay, good morning.
This one more last night.
Okay, before starting, I'd like to say that in this unprecedented moment and highly captivated season, I'd like to thank the wise remarks, the valuable instructions, the good encouragement of our coordinator, Dr. Mohammed. I'd like also to express my special gratitude to Professor Mehloud. Thank you for being here today. Your presence is really an honor to each one of us here. I'd like also to thank the distinguished audience. Thank you for being here today. So the title of the presentation is Critical Curriculum in the Postmodern Era. So as you see here from the title is composed of two different terms. We want to say critical in the sense that it involves some aspects of the critical thinking. I mean that critical thinking is integrated within the curriculum. And in the era, of course, of the postmodernism. So this curriculum, from one hand, is critical, from the other hand, is innovative. Innovative in the sense that the world has witnessed, an era of the emergence of the ICT, information and communication technologies. This has resulted in the redefinition of a lot of terms, especially in the field of literacies. Literacies has changed. I mean, the definition has changed from we have witnessed a shift from the traditional definitions to more innovative, definitions of literacies. Concerning the contents, we'll introduce the topic and we will talk about the postmodernism features, aspects, and then we'll go to discuss the curriculum models, and we'll try to focus mainly on the product, this process, as the Professor Noor has already mentioned. But this time I will try once again to shift the discussion to discuss the modernist perspective towards curriculum, and then this versus the postmodernist curriculum. The emergence of new literacies. With the appearance of ICT, there are other innovative literacies. We witness shifts from more traditional literacies to more innovative literacies. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll come up with some implications in the field of curriculum curriculum development and in the field of language teaching and learning in general. I will start here by citing a quotation by Slattery 2006. Slattery, is one of the curriculum developers who is affected by the postmodernism as a school of art. He said that postmodern schooling must reconnect students and teachers, space and time, meaning and context, the knower and the known, the humanities and sciences, and especially past, present, and future. What modernity has rent essential, temps à part ce thesis, postmodernity re-evaluates as radically eclectic by embracing the fragmented beauty of realism. So, as we see here, postmodernism came to account for the weaknesses of modernism. If modernism believed in fragmentation, postmodernism came to believe in the unity. Came to unify those different fragmented parts. And as we see here, that it reconnects the teachers and students. So we've discussed the roles of both teachers and learners, and then time and space, humanities and sciences, in the sense that we will see that education, the postmodern education, is an education that believes in interdisciplinary aspects and in the cross-border links. So it believes in it should break down the walls between humanities and sciences. And here we have another character which is eclectic. It believes also in eclecticism, to borrow from different branches, from different fields. So this presentation, the aim of this presentation is to identify postmodern features and to relate them to the field of ELT, curriculum development. So we're going to identify those features, and then we're going to relate them. We'll see how we can apply them in the field of curriculum development. We can then examine implications for the field of language teaching and learning and curriculum development. Okay, I will start here by presenting some models of curriculum development. We'll start by one model which is Tyler in 1949. Here, the curriculum, the aim of the curriculum is to transmit facts, skills, and values to students. And the model stresses on the mastery of conventional school subjects through traditional teaching methods. It can be reduced to this simpler model. So we start with the aims and the objectives first, and then after that the content, and then the organization of the content, and the evaluation as the last step. As we see here, 1949, the 50s and 60s, here this era has witnessed the emergence of behaviorism as a school, as a perspective in the field of education. So Taylor was affected by this school by behaviorism. And this model, there are many objections to this model. So first, it is mechanical. So we start by the aims, objectives, content, organization, and evaluation. So it is mechanical and linear. So we have here one after the other. There are objections to this model in the sense that it should be cyclical. It should be, one should lead to the other, but the model is linear. And Tyler was a product of his time, as I say, was a product of his time, and he was affected by behaviorism as a school, as a perspective. Now there is a shift, there has been a shift from the product to the process curriculum. Stenhouse 1955. Sorry, this is a mistake, 1975. He advocated principles for selecting content, developing teaching strategies, sequencing learning experiences, and assessing students' strengths and weaknesses with an emphasis on empiricism. A process curriculum was designed to be not an outline to be followed, but a proposal to be tested. So the linking, the key words here are teaching, and we can say to teaching and learning strategy, which means that there is a shift from the what to the how. So we focus mainly on how students learn. And sequential learning experiences in the order in which the content will be taught, and the assessment of students, of both students' strengths and weaknesses, and the focus was on empiricism, which means that the aim is to test the process of curriculum development. So this process, of curriculum development is more dynamic. It's not like the other model of Taylor, which is static. Now there is another model, which is curriculum as praxis, 1987. So here it tries to emancipate students from the ideological distortions that might disempower or bias their minds. So the focus here is on the aspects of the hidden curriculum, which is integrated, in textbooks. And it enables individuals to become critically aware of how they perceive the world and their acting in it. I'd like to mention here that textbooks can never be neutral. Textbooks carry with them sorts of cultural and ideological aspects. So these cultural and ideological aspects are always there in the textbooks. And the teachers should be and have to be aware of these ideological and cultural aspects. So textbooks are not innocent. So here, curriculum as praxis, we can say that curriculum as hidden, as implicit, curriculum as something which cannot be seen. Now, the previous models were criticized because they did not emphasize the importance of context. Conbert, 1990, came to account for this weakness. So there has been an emphasis on the context of curriculum and the notion of curriculum as a social process in which personal interactions within the learning environment take on considerable significance. So the other models did not emphasize. When we say the context, we mean here the social environment. How can studying the social environment contribute to the process of curriculum development? We have here a quotation by Harrison, 1990, who say that teaching a language is not a value-free or transparent activity. What we do in the classroom is affected by who we are, the views we hold, and the societies we are part of. So the process of language teaching and learning is affected by who we are, by the personalities we have, by the views we hold. When we say the views we hold, the views we have towards language learning and teaching, the views we have towards the nature of language and learning, and the societies we are part of. When we say the societies, I mean the outside world. We cannot understand the inside. We cannot understand what happens inside the classroom without being aware for what happens outside the classroom. So there is, a relationship between the inside, the notion of the inside, and the outside. Now, we'll present here another model, which is Graves 2000. In his model, he emphasizes too the importance of the outside. When I say outside, I mean the context. So here we have defining the context and articulating beliefs as two foundations for the, very important foundations for the process of curriculum design. And then comes the process of course design. We start by assessing needs analysis. After that, we formulate the goals and objectives of the course. We develop materials. We design an assessment plan, the means of assessment, about formative and summative assessments. We organize the course, and we conceptualize content. But here, the two main elements are, for Graves 2000, are defining the context and articulating beliefs. So he is, his model is a social cultural model in which he emphasizes the importance of the context and the importance of studying society before conducting course design or curriculum development. So here, this era has witnessed the emergence of what is called the environment analysis, meaning to study the environment before conducting the process of curriculum development. Some researchers and some scholars, include needs analysis within environmental analysis, or environment analysis. Once again here, Nation and Mcnaas 2010, they come up with the same model in which they give more importance to the environment, which they examine the environment and they assess needs. After that, we assess needs analysis. We decide on principles and we set goals and choose the sequence content, the order in which the content will be taught. We design the lesson format and we include assessment procedures, and the last step is to evaluate the course. So once again, they emphasize, they give more importance to the environment analysis. So we could have that link between, as I said before, between the inside and the outside. Now, after citing these models, we'll move to talk about the categories and the features of postmodernism. As we see, I say that postmodernism came to account for the weaknesses of modernism and will shift from what is traditional to what is innovative in the field of curriculum development. So the first aspect is the crossing of borders. Breaking down of barriers between different branches. As I said in the beginning, that the postmodern curriculum, links between humanities and sciences, links between the inside and the outside. So it came to account, to integrate different elements within the curriculum development. The second is decolonization. Decolonization in the sense that curriculum development should be diverse, and diversification and regionalism. When we say here diversification, which means that curriculum development should promote diversity. When we say diversity of cultural aspects, diversity of, when we say gender, we should account for both males and females. Diversity, of multilingual learners, we should account for the different learners. Diversity in the sense that it should account for the different ethnic groups. So, and decentralization, lateral decision making. The teacher is not the only authority in the classroom. We should give more roles to the students, and then we should promote student autonomy, as our professor has already mentioned. And the fourth one is deconstruction. When we say deconstruction here, Derrida came to our mind. I mean, questioning traditional assumptions. I mean, the role of both the teachers and the learners is to question whatever comes to their mind. So here, the role is to question even the unquestionable. And when we say to question here, we can cite Paulo Freire in his two books, I mean, the Pedagogy of the Oppressed and the Pedagogy of Freedom, in which he emphasizes the role of discussion. Yes, emphasizes the role of discussion in the classroom. I mean, that we should provide students with problem-solving activities in which we could elicit different perspectives concerning the problems that we have in society. And eclecticism here, we say that borrowing from different systems and fields. Okay, pastiche, imitating the works of others, often satirically. So the aim is to imitate the outside world again, to imitate what is happening in the outside world, and sometimes in a humorous way. Relativism, time, space, truth, and moral values are relative to the persons or groups holding them. So there is no one truth, but we have different truths. Everybody, I mean, considers, sees truth from his or her own perspective. Some relativism. There is no one truth, but we have different truths. Self-contradiction, doubleness, duplicity, the conscious making of self and the meaning statements. Self-duplicity and doubleness. Sometimes we should contradict even ourselves. We should question the beliefs that we have. And self-reference and self-reflexiveness, the use of meta-language, so we should go beyond language, and self-constructing forms. Now we'll go to compare between the modernist and the postmodernist curriculum. We have a table here. And I will start by the assessment. In the modern curriculum, we have standardized testing. I mean, absolute measurement, and the focus on the products of learning. So here, the measurement is standardized. It is fixed. And in the postmodern curriculum, we should, focus on the classroom-based assessment using portfolios, archives, and journals, formative self and peer assessment. Here, the assessment is relativistic. There is a relativistic focus on process, the construction of the standardized testing paradigm. So here, the assessment is more or less, it is subjective more than, quantitative. Here, the postmodern curriculum and the classroom-based assessment gives more opportunities to the students to account for their weaknesses. Each student has weaknesses and strengths. The second is that competition, aggression, competitive individualization, and survival of the fittest. So modern curriculum promotes, the survival of the fittest, the survival of the strongest students concerning marriage. But postmodern curriculum, promotes collaboration, social learning, decentralization, balanced by a new form of individualization and autonomous learning and self-access learning. As you see here, we have collaboration. Studying English through elitist English literature. As we see in the era of the audiolingualism, especially on the direct method, the focus was on the elitist English literature as the only genre which is stressed. So the strict boundaries and restrictions of genre. Learning English through pop culture, so concerning postmodernism, comics, the internet. Here we emphasize the plurality of genre and the crossing boundaries and eclecticism, and we should borrow from we should use different types of text in the classrooms. Okay? Here the focus in modern curriculum is the linguistic imperialism or colonialism, the English native speaker as the only model. So the native speaker is the model in modern curriculum. While in the postmodern curriculum, postcolonialism or decolonization, expressing local cultures through diverse Englishes and lingua francas. So here we witness the death of the native speaker. We could think, for example, here in Morocco, why not say, for example, Moroccan English rather than English or American English? So we should, witness the death of the native speaker. Structural syllable. In postmodernism, there is a shift from the structural syllabi in which we give importance to the structures of language to the task-based and project-based process. Of course, task-based inside the classroom and project-based outside the classroom syllabi. So we have the deconstruction, once again, deconstruction of the propositional language learning concepts. So we should focus more on the task-based and project-based process syllabi. In modern curriculum, it is quantitative, objective research, absolute measurement of rigorously isolated, independently observed truths, while the postmodernism is qualitative, subjective, action research. When we say action research, which means that the teachers here are supposed to conduct action research inside the classroom, so as to promote, as our teachers say, professional development, and at the same time we could come up with a bottom-up approach to curriculum development. The modern curriculum is behaviorist, has a behaviorist view of learning as predictable and independent of emotions. So, they don't consider the emotions of the students. They don't consider those affective, aspects that can affect the process of learning and even teaching. So, while in the postmodern curriculum there is a recognition of affective and social features, language learning as a social, cultural, and emotional and unpredictable. So we have a deconstruction once again of these elements. The last time here, we have a standardized Western English. I have already mentioned this. Here in postmodern curriculum, we could come up with regional Englishes, dialects, and pronunciation, decentralization, regionalization, and diversification. So promoting diversity again in the curriculum is the key to success. In modern curriculum, it is linear, mechanical, sequential learning, language as a code. So the process of learning is linear, while in the postmodern curriculum, we use the meta-language and learning strategies in a non-linear learning format. So here the format is more dynamic, while in the modern curriculum, the format is linear and mechanical. In modern curriculum, the focus is on teacher-centered learning, while in the postmodern curriculum, the focus is on the student-centered learning. So we give the learners more autonomy, more freedom in the classroom, and we involve them. We'll see later how we can even involve learners in the process of curriculum development, maybe through needs analysis. Teacher-controlled learning, while in the postmodern curriculum, we have student autonomy, self-directed learning. And the last one is the studying of the culture of the target language. In the modern curriculum, we study the culture of the target language. So here we have colonialism or centralization, while in the postmodern curriculum, we study regional and global cultures through the target language. So I think that we should first start by studying the local cultures, the regional cultures, so that we could have those learners who who become aware of themselves first. So to become aware of yourself is the key to understand the world in this case. So the focus is on regionalism and globalism. So here I say that we have an example of a dynamic learning model in which we could integrate all these elements, and we could see the process of learning as dynamic but not as a linear. So we have here so many elements. The first one is the student-centered, the student-centered approach. We have the non-threatening environment. We have the positive affect. When we say the positive affects, I mean the emotional factors, the affective factors. We have autonomy. The teacher as a facilitator. Education of the whole person. I mean, we educate the person as a whole. And here, in this case, we see the student as both, heart, mind, and body. When we say the whole person, heart, mind, and body. And we have the group work and task-based language teaching project. And the process of learning, of course, is holistic. We have confidence and motivation as two more affective factors. And we have classroom-based assessment, which is an alternative way of assessment and not a traditional way.